What's up guys, Leopold the Brave here, and ranking death battle seasons is something I've always wanted to do, but can never figure out how. One season could have a few of my favorite episodes of all time, but then another season could pretty consistently have matchups I moderately enjoy throughout the whole way. And some seasons have episodes that make me enjoy them regardless of poor quality if they use a character I'm interested in. It's just overall very tricky to figure out which episodes I like more than the others and by how much. I can't really say any of them carried the season for me. So to figure this all out, we're going to go through each season with a point system I've come up with. 1 point for each matchup with a character I'm interested in. Not a character I love, but a character that still makes me go, huh, neat. 2 points for each matchup that uses a character I love. 3 points for each matchup that manages to keep me interested despite not really caring for either character and only finding them moderately interesting. And 4 points for each matchup where both characters I adore. Remember, this ranking is based on matchups, not just using characters I enjoy. So the matchup points will always be higher. And then there's a super special bonus 5 points for battle royales. I'm really not a huge fan of same series fights, so if one manages to grab my interest, then it's pretty impressive. Now, one more thing before I get started. Season 2 has quite a large amount of episodes, twice as much as a regular season. No really, 32 episodes compared to most seasons' 16. And nearly 10 more than Season 1. So to keep things a bit more fair, I'll reduce its final score by 25%, just to keep it from getting a quantity over quality win. If it manages to be number 1 even after that reduction, it just proves how good it was. But with all of that said, let's get to ranking. Season 1 starts off very strong. There are quite a few matchups here that I love, like Mario vs Sonic, Link vs Cloud, the Goku vs Superman. And then there's plenty of characters I love, like Akuma, Vegeta, Leonardo, and speaking of Leonardo, a battle royale I was interested in, so that's a big 5-pointer right there. Plus I love Eggman, Luke Skywalker, and Spider-Man, toss in a few other characters I like Samus and Chun-Li. And the final score I got for Season 1 was a whopping 31 points, that's gonna be tough to beat. Season 2, even with the score nerf it's destined to get for being so long, still ends up with a pretty impressive number. It had some pretty big matchups I loved. Goku vs Superman 2, Dan Hibiki vs Hercule, Knuckles vs Donkey Kong, and while the episode isn't that great, Gaara vs Toph. Characters I love include Luigi, Ryu, Boo, Snake, Darth Vader, and plenty more. There are plenty of characters I just simply liked too, like Fox, M. Bison, He-Man, and a couple others. There weren't that many non-favorite character matchups that stood out to me, besides maybe Wolverine vs Raiden and maybe Chuck vs Segata, and so the final score I ended up with was 37. But with the score reduction of 25%, it came down to 27.75, rounding up to 28. For many people, it may seem a bit weird that Season 1 got a better score than Season 2, considering Season 2 has Wolverine vs Raiden, Dan vs Hercule, and Snake vs Sam, which people consider to be the best episode death battle has ever made. Plus, it had a pretty unique season finale with Pokemon vs Digimon, as opposed to a bunch of comic book titans. But you also gotta remember, this is the same season that had Yang vs Tifa, Gaara vs Toph, Batman again, Beast vs Goliath, a remake of Samus vs Boba Fett. Meanwhile, going back to Season 1, it has the original Link vs Cloud and Goku vs Superman, the iconic Ninja Turtle Battle Royale, and the amazingly fast-paced and fun Batman vs Spider-Man. So hopefully Season 2's score makes a lot more sense now. Season 3 has some really strong contenders. Even though the episode didn't turn out great, Bowser vs Ganon is a great matchup. Ratchet and Clank vs Jak and Daxter is also amazing. I love Joker vs Sweet Tooth, and Ken vs Terry. Also, seeing characters like the Scout, Bayonetta, and Ramona Flowers show up even though the episodes are kinda was still pretty amazing. And even though I'm not the hugest fan of The Flash or Shadow the Hedgehog, it was still cool to see them again too. All of this gives Season 3 a score of 24. It's the lowest score so far, but this is also the shortest season of the entire series, so that's actually pretty impressive. Season 4 is where things start to get rough. We don't really get to anything I love until the second half of the season with Lucario, who's my favorite Pokemon. This is coming from a non-Pokemon fan, so I don't really have much options for a favorite. Now don't get me wrong, I like Lara Croft, I like Android 18, Zero is pretty cool, and there were some fun ideas like Scrooge McDuck vs Shovel Knight, and I also like Sub-Zero. But the season doesn't really pick up until the unique fighting game fight, TJ Combo vs Balrog, then we get Shredder vs Silver Samurai, Smokey vs McGruff, and I like Naruto and Sephiroth. The final score I got for Season 4 was 22. Despite being 2 episodes more than the previous season, it ended up with a score of 2 points less. Season 5 came out swinging. I enjoy Raven, I find Kenshiro pretty interesting, but then I got back-to-back Crash vs. Spyro and Sora vs. Pit. Then it sorta leans back and chills out for a bit and gives me back-to-back Ryu vs. Jin and a Samurai Jack fight. The entire first half of the season plus Jack vs. Afro is littered with characters I find interesting and matchups I love. But then it kinda trips a little in the second half with a bunch of comic book characters and giant robots which I'm not too interested in. The Mario vs. Sonic rematch was fun, and so was Roshi vs. Jiraiya, but nothing else that's big enough to take note of. It was still a pretty good season though, ending up with a score of 25. Oh, Season 6 is where things get dire. There's not a single matchup in this season that I love until we get to the season finale with All Might vs. Might Guy. Now don't get me wrong, there are still characters I love sprinkled throughout the season like The Mask, Ganondorf, Sasuke, Aang, and a couple more characters I like, for example Wario, Captain Falcon, and Lobo, one of the very few comic characters I'm interested in. And even though I haven't seen Mob Psycho, it was still a pretty interesting series to bring to Death Battle. But if it weren't for All Might vs. Might Guy, this entire season would have 0 heavy hitters, and the final score for it is 16. Season 5 is when the too many Marvel vs. DC matchups or comic book characters complaint became a big deal, and Season 6 didn't really help its case, starting off with Aquaman vs. Namor, characters no one really cares about like Black Widow and Captain Marvel, and then of course the whole Green Lantern fiasco. Just looking at all the Season 6 episodes lined up here tells me that, yeah, this isn't escaping the bottom anytime soon. Thankfully, Season 7 turned things around really fast. I love Miles and I like Static. Again, I love Leonardo. I love Genos. Machamp is a Pokemon I find interesting. Booster Gold sounds like an interesting and fun character. And then we get hit with the back-to-back Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi and Danny Phantom vs. Jake Long. While Danny vs. Jake wasn't a great episode, the matchup was still pretty exciting. A couple episodes later we get Beerus and Zuko back-to-back. Then we get Sonic again. Yeah, it was Ken Penders' Archie Sonic, blah, but Sonic is Sonic. After this though, all the positives come to a screeching halt until the very end with Rock Lee and Broly. In between Sonic and Rock Lee, we have 2 Marvel vs. DC fights with Batgirl and Spider-Gwen, and then Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier, more Marvel with Venom, Red vs. Blue, and then there's The Boys and Saberwolf vs. John Talbane. Now I'm sure there's nothing wrong with The Boys, I just haven't seen it yet and am not interested. And while Saber vs. John is a really cool and unique fighting game matchup, I'd be lying if I said I was super duper interested in it or knew who they were beforehand. But even though it dropped the ball hard, Season 7 still did an excellent job, ending up with 27 points. Season 8 was an absolute monster. Yoda vs. King Mickey, Heihachi vs. Geese, Iron Fist vs. Poe, Link vs. Cloud 2, Goku Black vs. Reverse Flash, Dio vs. Alucard, Saitama vs. Popeye. Plus we got to see Shadow and Akuma again, we got Madara, we got something fun and experimental with Kool-Aid Man vs. Macho Man, a cartoon versus cartoon fight which we desperately need more of with Steven vs. Star, and it only had 2 Marvel vs. DC fights with Lex vs. Doom and Batman vs. Iron Man. Lex vs. Doom actually being pretty fun and not as boring as some people exaggerate it to be. While Korra vs. Storm didn't interest me at all, the fight was still at least pretty to look at. The only episode this season that could truly be considered bad was Mikasa vs. Blake. Overall, this season was filled to the brim with a ton of unique, interesting, and experimental matchups that I'd love to see more of. Many of them had an absurd amount of quality, making them comparable to old greats like Snake vs. Sam Fisher. Saitama vs. Popeye may even be better. So with all of this said, Season 8 becomes the new #1 with a final score of 35. Now do you see why I gave Season 2 that score reduction? Despite being twice as long as Season 8, its original score was only 2 points higher. That would have felt like such a fake first place win. Now, Season 9 just started, so I'm not going to include it in the final ranking, but let's see where it lands so far score-wise. Harley Quinn vs. Jinx. I don't love either character, but they're both pretty interesting to me, so that's a 3-pointer. Marvel vs. DC, animes I haven't seen and don't really care about, and then Vegeta, another character I love. So in total that would be about 5 points. Not a terrible start, but not fantastic either. But we'll see how it ends up. So, here are the final rankings. In 8th place, it's Season 6 with 16 points. 7th place, Season 4 with 22 points. 6th place, Season 3 with 24 points. 5th place, Season 5 with 25 points. 4th place, Season 7 with 27 points. 3rd place, Season 2 with 28 points. Second place, Season 1 with 31 points, and first place, Season 8 with 35 points. Now remember, these rankings were based on matchup. I did mention the episode's quality, but it was mostly who was fighting who that got me to watch each episode in the first place, regardless of quality. So these rankings were definitely more accurate to my personal taste rather to what would objectively be the best season in terms of quality. So according to these rankings, the top 3 things that pull me in are unique and underrated series like Tekken, Crash Bandicoot, Mob Psycho, Twisted Metal, Jak and Daxter, and so on. Then all the fun experimental ones like Smokey vs. McGruff, Poe, Iron Fist, Saitama vs. Popeye, Steven vs. Star. And then of course the non-Marvel vs. DC heavy hitters, Mario vs. Sonic, Hulk vs. Broly, All Might vs. Might Guy, and so on. The things that turn me away from a matchup are characters I have no interest in, obviously, like giant robots and kaijus. Then of course I share that big complaint of too much Marvel vs. DC, and finally characters that get reused or same series fights with battle royales. Now there are some characters like Akuma and Sonic that I do like seeing multiple times, but stuff like Batman and Deadpool, no thank you. But overall, those were my Death Battle rankings, and now you can tell what kinds of things I'm into versus whys. Let me know what your season rankings are and why in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Leopold the Brave, out.